Congresswoman, thank you for being with us. And thank you for many initiatives you took and efforts to support Ukraine. But in the current state of affairs on the Hill, and specifically in the House, how difficult it will be to pass another legislation to support Ukraine?
Well, that's a really good question, Natalka, and I'm very pleased to be on this program and honored, actually. Let me just say, in terms of the House, we now have close to 100 members of the U.S. House of Representatives on a bipartisan basis that are members of the Ukraine caucus. That is quite significant. I always manage during the week to wear my pins, as do many, many members in support of Ukraine on both sides of the aisle. Now, in the legislation we passed last year, we provided sufficient funding for Ukraine for this year, expecting that we might have a few speed bumps in the road here that we would have to negotiate. But I think the support for Ukraine is very deep and strong on both sides of the aisle. So I'm optimistic. We are just moving into our new session now in our various committees. Members have just been appointed to their committees, and of course the interest groups will come forward and make their views known, and I know that those who support Ukraine will, and I encourage them to do that. But I'm feeling very good about our ability to supply our allies and assist Ukraine so that she is victorious in this terrible, terrible war.
Congresswoman, Ukraine and its government and its people many times said how grateful they are, especially to the American government for all their efforts and their help and aid packages. However, we all know that war is quite expensive business, and to run it for Ukraine costs a lot of money. It's around $6 billion monthly to pay the bills, to run the economy, to pay military, to buy supplies and munitions. So when we think of this $45 billion last package passed inside of the National Defense Authorization Act, this money will partly go to Ukraine, partly go to support European allies, Americans, to buy those supplies and to support all those people who are here in the United States, fled the country because of the war. So how likely the financial aid would be an obstacle here?
Well, we are moving into Congress where we have divided government. The House is controlled by the Republican Party marginally, and the Senate by the Democratic Party marginally. So I would just say that our country has our responsibilities to our NATO allies, first of all, to uphold our security arrangements with them. We've been doing a great deal in order to protect the territory we are bound by law to protect and by treaty. The president of Ukraine was just in Britain. Really magnificent reception across the British Commonwealth and in Western Europe. So other nations, it isn't just the United States. There are other nations that understand that victory for Ukraine is essential because it is the new scrimmage line for liberty in Europe. And we know the history of Russia. We know Russia is an expansionist power and a predatory one. When she crossed over Ukraine's border, she violated every single tenet of international law, violating the territorial integrity and sovereignty of an independent country that had been independent for over 3 decades. So she's done something terribly wrong, and now the war has moved to a point where I believe Russia will be brought before international tribunals because of the terrorist nature of what she is doing, killing and raping civilians, women, killing children, trafficking in children, killing the elderly. What kind of behavior, demented behavior is that? And so she will continue to pay a price. You can see the sanctions are beginning to bite down now as time goes on Russia. And hopefully there'll be enough people in Russia to recognize that further plunder really isn't a help to Russia or to any other set of rational human beings that inhabit the planet. So I think that Congress will continue to support Ukraine's efforts as we have, as best we can through equipment and through supplies, and to try to heal those who are being injured.
So because you touched on bringing Russia into the international court and held it accountable, do you have an understanding, especially with European allies, how exactly you're going to approach to this situation from the legal standpoint?
I think what's happening now in Europe, and again, the United States doesn't act alone, but other countries are coming forward and suggesting the manner in which the hearings could be held. And I don't think Europe has reached agreement on that, but it's definitely a very high priority on the agenda of the European countries. It was interesting to me that this week, again, there was a call by Ukraine for membership in the European Union. And you're talking about a lot of countries. It isn't just one country. And so they have to reach agreement, but they're all focused on how to help Ukraine win and how to help her negotiate her membership in the European Union. These are all good signs. It's moving slowly, but it's moving. And Ukraine's people and her soldiers are just distinguishing themselves for the world to see. And I think in the end, I think what will happen is that not only will Ukraine be victorious, but we're going to see the very nature of liberty enlightened by these terrible sacrifices that have been made, and that Central Europe is going to become much more pivotal in the world of politics internationally because of what she is winning. The respect of the public across borders, and also her sacrifice will bring liberty to millions of people that have never experienced it before. And that's really what Russia's afraid of. She's afraid to kind of grow up and to move into the 21st century. Her own people would benefit by it. The backwardness of life in Russia is really something to experience, which I have. And I find it pitiful for the people of Russia. So I think Ukraine is an idea. She's not just a nation, she's an idea that people that were formerly subjugated can now be free. And when that moment comes, and it will, the lives of millions of people will become bettered over time. So this battle is of consequence for the concept of liberty for those who have been repressed and subjugated for so long.
Congresswoman, because you just touched on Russia, I will probably ask you something quite unconventional, because we often ask what would be the end game for Ukraine, and many voices would say Ukraine will win. Of course, but how do you think things will turn out for Russia? And more importantly, what would be the end game for current Russian regime?
Well, I think that those who are well experienced and well traveled have to think about the next generation in Russia. If you look at social conditions in Russia, they're not good. And the sanctions are going to bear down hard, and they will continue to bear down hard. I think that there are rational people inside of Russia, and I think they have to be thinking hard about how to end this conflict. And and to come out with any kind of, I think they have lost respect around the world at such a level. I don't know how Russia recovers from this, if you want to know the truth. I think that for Ukraine, her ability to live under the conditions in which they are suffering now, and to stand off this country that has so violated every precept of human goodness that possibly exists. I think that Russia's losing every day. She's losing every day in world opinion. And a new generation has to rise in Russia too. And what was somewhat surprising to me, though not unexpected, the number of younger people leaving Russia, escaping, and they still are, not wanting to live under that regime. Surely there must be some people inside of Russia that see this. I've traveled through Russia. I'm banned from going there now. But there are people there that want progress for their own people. And this is all being put on hold now. And people there, they're losing sons. They're losing their family members for this worthless escapade by Putin. And surely at some point it's going to come home to the people of Russia, you know what, this isn't in our interest. This isn't in the, interests of the future of this country. So I think, though this war has dragged on for almost a year now, I think that it's having a reciprocal impact inside of Russia, though because of the banning of the media and everything, we don't see that every day, but it has to be going on.
Well, partly I would agree with you, but there is another opinion that there is a generation of young children who are already brainwashed in daycares and schools to praise Putin and the glorious war and Wagner Group, what we are going to do with them. And they're growing up to adults. And what could be a process of reintegrating them to any sort of society that does not believe that war is a solution?
Well, I think that Ukraine, with its linguistic capabilities, and other countries in the region, I think they have to do their part to try to use social media and other ways of reaching people. There are still familial connections that exist in some places. I think that over time, and I think this is what Putin's afraid of, that he's probably incapable of changing. I'm so angry with him, really. I expected more of him. I expected more. And he's acting like it's 1930. So he's behind the times. He's not accepting the possibilities of a modern era for his own people. And Russia needs a lot of help, sad to say. And I think that the media will come with it. I think a lot of the social media that exists now, there will be different ways of people communicating. It's going to take a while, but the first order of business is to win in Ukraine. And that will usher in a new era. And that will benefit many countries in the region, not just Ukraine.
So you mentioned that Ukraine supposed to win, and this is a statement. And to help Ukraine win the war, a lot of countries all over the globe are coming with different sorts of aid. So just recently, the United Kingdom said that they're going to provide to Ukrainian pilots a special training program so they would be able to operate Western-made fighter jets. The United States had a similar program, but it was not included to NDA of 2023. How likely, because the United Kingdom already made this step, this program will be returned to the table?
I think that in terms of the supply of weapons and so forth, I'll leave that to the military experts, what's needed when. But I do believe that it's important that several countries provide assistance to Ukraine. The United States is doing its part. We're part of a coalition of nations to protect all of Europe under NATO. And I want to congratulate the citizens of the United Kingdom for their help and for the training that will be provided there. They're great pilots, by the way. And Russia has become famous for trying to fly up the English Channel just to bump up against the airspace, try to threaten Britain. What a mistake that is. And so the Brits know what's at stake. And they will provide very fine training. In my region, we manufacture the M1A2 tank, the M1A1 prior to that. And so we understand something about land warfare in my region of the world. And we intend to keep our commitments to Ukraine. So I think it's important to have a broad coalition of support and not just depend on one country. I think the Poles are distinguishing themselves in what they are doing. I complimented them recently, many of their leaders, on accepting so many citizens from Ukraine inside their country to provide them refuge. And many are going back now and returning many of the soldiers to the front. And other countries that adjoin that border with Ukraine, they've been magnificent. And they're not the largest countries in Europe. What courage that takes. What courage.
So I heard that you have some Polish descent and being raised in the United States and representing people of Ohio. Right now you have a lot of your constituents of Polish descent too, but also Ukrainian, so they don't probably need an explanation. But when you talk to your constituents, how exactly you explain to them why helping Ukraine, supporting Ukraine is important? Why it's supposed to be their interest, they pay their own dollars?
Yes, well, you know what's interesting about our region? We became the recipients of immigration from Central Europe for generations as people either survived or fled tyranny. So we are a part of America that, whether you're talking about New York City, but then proceeding west from there, if you're in Buffalo, New York, or Rochester, or Erie, Pennsylvania, or Cleveland, Ohio, or Toledo, Ohio, or Detroit, Michigan, or Chicago, Illinois, if you look through that whole region, we have, just in Cleveland, we have the third largest Ukrainian American population in the United States. Philadelphia and Chicago have higher populations, but as a percent of our population, this is quite significant in our region. In terms of Polish Americans, my own heritage, though our mother's parents came from what is now Khmelnytsky Oblast inside of Ukraine because the borders changed, we have over 140,000 individuals of Polish heritage just in northern Ohio. That's a huge number. Actually. We have over 50,000 Hungarian Americans in the greater Cleveland area. We have Bulgarians, Estonians, Latvians, Lithuanians. It looks like little Europe all throughout the region that I represent. And the reason that people are there is because their families could not live. They could not survive. Each story is so compelling if you listen to these family stories. Some have written books. I'm actually working on a movie right now about one family that I've represented and what they endured, both in Europe and then when they came to the United States. I think it's important that we tell these stories and that Americans enlarge their knowledge of history and why liberty is so precious to those of us who are blessed to have it. And I think that this kind of enlightenment, Russia's war on Ukraine, helps educate the world about how the struggle for liberty remains ongoing in our world today. And so for my own constituents, I have represented some of the most brave and persevering human beings I have ever met.
Congresswoman, your assistants are telling me that we are very close to let you go, so I have one last question to summarize. What do you think are the biggest accomplishments of the United States government in aiding Ukraine as we approach to this first year of a full-scale invasion of Ukraine from Russia, and what could be done better?
Well, first of all, we have a whole new generation of young people in Ukraine who have been allowed to grow up in a country that had liberty for the first time. And I can see the difference in the way they walk, in the looks in their faces. They know there's a better way forward. They know. They've lived it. And so I see hope. I see hope in the eyes of people that I never saw hope before. Because my first trip to Ukraine was in 1973, as we attempted to find the history of our own family, and which proved to be very difficult. And I never knew it would be so hard. We were followed by the secret police. We were watched everywhere we went. We were supposed to have family unification, which proved extremely difficult. I go there now, and people are able to have their own businesses. They're able to educate their children. The teachers are so magnificent and enduring through this war. That kind of raw strength to keep going no matter what is just world class. I mean, we're going to have a football game here over the weekend, the Super Bowl. Nothing can compare to what the Ukrainian people are doing right now. That to me is true greatness. And they know it. And they know it. And that commitment is going to win. And they will inspire the world. And that's, so initially, the terror that happened was a shock to the whole world. But now what you're seeing is individuals, countries, organizations trying to find ways to help Ukraine. And that's happening not as fast as we would hope, but it's happening in a very measured way. And I think that victory will come soon, I hope. And we will be a part, the United States will play a major role in that. I just hope we are better able to organize our assistance that comes from the private sector, oblast by oblast, in a more organized manner than we've been able to do to date.
So what is the greatest accomplishment of the United States government within this year of supporting Ukraine, do you think?
Well, I think for the United States to make sure that Ukraine has the proper weaponry and support to win.
Thank you for your time and thank you for your opinion and support to Ukraine. I was joined by Congressman Marcy Kaptur, co-chair of Ukrainian Congressional Caucus.